Freddie was a very good boy. He had a couple of jobs, dishwashing jobs and that, before he went into the service. Mm-hmm. Then he decided he wanted to go to the war. That was it, he said. He feels like he needs to fight for his family and his country. Mm-hmm. And that's when he went off to war in 1966. Okay. With Vietnam the way it was and the terrible fighting and killing, I wasn't too happy about it. But I thought, if that's what he wants, that's what makes him happy, then I'm all for it. Mm-hmm. He was just a regular soldier most of the time. After he got into Vietnam, he became the driver of a Jeep that would go from base to base, picking up and delivering items. And that was his end, is that Jeep. But otherwise, he had a couple of 3 leaves, came home on leave. One time, came home AWOL, and because he had been home, and his grandmother loved him so much, my mother, that she gave him quite a bit of money in that, and he was so homesick that when he got back to the base, he didn't want to be there anymore, so he came back home AWOL. But as soon as he got back, he turned himself in, because I told him it would be best. And he turned himself in, was taken back by the MPs, and then finished his tour. Okay. Many, many letters he wrote to me. Mm-hmm. And of course, I wrote back to him. Mm-hmm. We corresponded a lot while he was in there. He wasn't too happy with the heat. He said it was very hot, a lot of rain, a lot of mud, and as I spoke in the article that you read, mosquitoes were real bad, and when he was on guard duty, it was at nighttime. He said it was very lonely. The enemy would try to sneak in and was, I suppose, going to kill some of our soldiers, but he didn't like guard duty at all. He wrote me about that. Mm-hmm. At one point in Vietnam, he was stationed close to an orphanage, and him being away from home and with a big family, he wanted to be a friend to some of them, and there was one little boy, 10 years old, that was always running away and coming to the camp where they were, and of course the soldiers would feed them and give them candy bars and pop and candy, and the guys would take turns taking him back to the orphanage. So he wrote to me that he would like to bring that little boy home or like to adopt him. Of course, my son wasn't qualified because he wasn't married and didn't have a home to bring him to. Mm-hmm. But he fell in love with that little orphan. Mm-hmm. Well, he had been the driver of a Jeep, and he was qualified to go home, and they told him sometimes the soldiers would get to go home a couple of weeks early. So he was replaced as a Jeep driver, and when he went to the plane to get leave to come home, the papers didn't line up with his leave, so he had to go back to his base. When he went back to the base, the driver of the Jeep was one of his buddies, and he asked my son if he would ride shotgun for him, which I suppose is manning the gun on the back of the Jeep. So my son went with him, and they went to another base to pick up a load of laundry. And on the way, I don't know if they had picked up the laundry or it was later, but they hit a landmine, and my son was thrown from the Jeep into a tree, And the driver, he died instantly. But my son lived 2 hours and 45 minutes. He died on a field hospital operating table because of the injuries to his head.
Now, how did you learn of this news?
By the government.
Okay.
That's where I got all my information.
So did you get like a phone call from someone part of his unit or a letter, or how exactly did you find out?
No. Later on, I was contacted by one or two of the guys that was in his company. But they weren't there when he got killed. They had known him during their times at the base, but they wasn't present when he had the wreck.
How long after that was he able to come back for you guys to have a funeral and everything to lay him to rest?
Yes. That's a sad, long story. It was the next morning, 25th. In fact, he got killed on my husband's birthday, and I was getting my kids ready for school that morning, and a car pulled up in front of my house, and I knew he was coming home early maybe, and I thought it was him and maybe a buddy. But when they walked up the driveway and got to the door, they asked if they could come in. And they had papers in their hands, and I thought, it had to be about my son. And I said, would you just please tell me one thing? Is my son badly hurt, or is he dead? And they said, could we come in? And I knew then that my son was gone. So they came in, gave me all the information. It was a very sad day. My children and my husband were still sleeping. Of course, my screams woke them all up after they told me my boy was gone. And they all came downstairs. A while back, there was a soldier here that Alan was his name. He's the one that invited me to the dinner with Westmoreland. And he spoke just a short time ago at the honored by the Salvation Army. Alan Lynch was his name. And I was invited to that dinner, my son and I, my caregiver. And I try to do everything I can. Anything in the newspaper, I'm a hoarder, I guess, of newspapers, because any item about Vietnam or anybody like the gentleman I spoke to you about, I save all those articles. My kids get a little upset with me, but they just have to bear with me. I know my heart goes out to those when I read those stories. It's like I'm a part of them. And it's like a family, more or less. The whole thing is like family. Anything to do with Vietnam, for years after my son died, I'd get the newspaper. Even if I saw an item that talked about vitamins, I'd see anything that started with a V, and right away my eyes would go there, because I thought it's something about Vietnam. And I was always just more, I don't know what the explanation is, but just Vietnam just was always close to me because my son died there. You'd be surprised at really how close you can get to people that have gone through the same heartaches that you have. You can really get close to people.
Now, you said you had two other sons that were in the military?
Yes.
Okay. Were they in Vietnam too, or were the different wars? Okay.
They didn't have to go at that time because one son got orders to go, that he was going to have to go to Vietnam. And he called me crying. He said, Mom said, I've got orders to go to Vietnam. I said, So I got on the phone and called I don't know what the ranks or the title, but the head man of where he was, and told him, and he told me, he said, Miss Kizziah, don't have to worry. Your son will not go to Vietnam. And whatever procedure he had to take, he kept my other son from going to Vietnam. But I suppose I had heard that soldiers, if they requested to go, that they could go if they had lost a brother. But if they didn't request it, they didn't have to go. And I was sure glad of that.
So they were trying to draft him after his brother had died?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was, that was my Michael. He was already in the service. I think at that time he was in Texas, Missouri maybe, when he got those orders that he was going to have to go.
Denmark, somewhere on the sea.
Oh.
But you were like, nope, Mama's putting her foot down. Not happening.
Yeah, not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
He did have to go. Where did he serve? In Belgium.
Yeah, I think so.
He was sent to Belgium.
Okay.
Many of the students. He was a student at Morton High School, around the corner here, and at his funeral, the biggest part of Morton High School was at his funeral. And some of the kids got together. They gave their lunch money, what little bit of money students could have. A couple of the kids got together and took up a collection, and they put all their names on a card, which I still have. I think Mr. Clark has it, of those that donated and gave in his memory. And I had so many students come to me and tell me what a great kid he was, how well he was liked, how much fun he was to be around. And I've even had them later on come by the house here and talk to me, because they were friends also with my other boys. And it makes you feel good that you had kids that other people liked and got along with. I only wish that people would honor soldiers when they see them. When my other kids and I go to restaurants or go shopping at stores, and we see a soldier in a uniform or wearing a cap with a service of our country on it, we always make it a point to go to them and shake hands with them and thank them for their service. And we're always grateful in our hearts that they made it back alive, because we had so many that didn't make it back.
Mm-hmm.